Welcome to episode 9 of the M.B.T podcast. In the previous episode, we discussed session 7, titled Understanding Personality Disorders. In this episode, we will continue with session 8. So, I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine the person you love most in the entire world just slammed a door and walked out of the room right in the middle of a huge argument.
Oh, that is such a universally terrible feeling.
Right. And in that exact millisecond, your brain does something that is honestly absolutely terrifying. It literally blinds you.
Yes, completely hijacked.
Exactly. The very neural networks that you need to, understand what just happened, to see the situation clearly, they just shut down. You are flying totally blind in an emotional hurricane.
And you don't even realize you're blind. That's the scariest part.
Right. So today we are doing a deep dive into why your own mind completely sabotages you when you need it the most. And more importantly, we're going to look at how a radical, multi-year therapy program can actually teach you how to see again.
Which is an incredible process. It really is.
It's massive. We are looking at mentalization-based treatment today, specifically part 1 of how this framework actually operates on the ground. Our mission for this deep dive is to demystify the day-to-day nuts and bolts of the treatment.
Because the theory is one thing, right? But the practice is a whole different animal.
Yeah, exactly. Sitting in a room and physically rewiring the pathways of your brain is a grueling universe compared to just reading about it.
It's a profound transition, and it requires just a tremendous amount of courage from the patient. What we are examining today, it comes directly from the Session 8 handouts found in the publications on M.B.T.
Which are so detailed, by the way.
Oh, incredibly detailed. We're looking at how these clinical guidelines take these, really complex neurobiological theories and translate them into a highly structured program.
A program you can actually execute.
Exactly. So we're going to explore the ultimate goals of the treatment, the architectural structure of it, and honestly, the fascinatingly strict rules of group therapy.
Yeah, we definitely need to get into those rules. Because at first glance, they seem almost harsh.
They do. They seem completely counterintuitive. But as we'll see, they are deeply, deeply rooted in the raw mechanics of human psychology.
Okay, so I want to jump straight into the deep end here. When you read through the protocols and the publications on M.B.T, the very first thing they establish is the ultimate goal of the therapy.
Right, the primary objective.
And it's wonderfully, almost ruthlessly specific. The goal is to improve mentalizing skills, specifically in close relationships, not just, out in the world.
No, not at all.
Not with your barista or the guy who cuts you off in traffic. It's focused entirely on your most intimate bonds. The material says doing this prevents you from being overwhelmed, leads to feeling stable, and ensures faster recovery.
Which is the key word there, recovery.
Right. So help me understand this hyperfocus. Why is the crucible of the close relationship the ultimate testing ground for this entire therapy?
Well, to understand that, we really have to look at one of the most profound paradoxes of human psychology. And it's this: the closer you get to someone, the harder it is to mentalize.
That seems like it should be the exact opposite.
I know, right? You'd think knowing someone well makes it easier. But mentalizing, just as a quick refresher for you listening, is the ability to imagine and interpret the mental states of yourself and others.
Like understanding thoughts, feelings, desires.
Exactly. So think about an acquaintance, like a coworker you only see in the break room. The emotional stakes there are incredibly low.
Right. My survival doesn't depend on the guy making copies.
Exactly. So if they snap at you because they're in a bad mood, you can easily just observe that behavior. You take a step back and think, oh man, they must be having a rough day.
Maybe they didn't sleep well.
I don't take it personally.
Right. You don't internalize it. And biologically, your prefrontal cortex, that highly evolved logical part of your brain right behind your forehead, it stays fully online.
Because there's no threat. Right. You are securely anchored in your own mind, observing theirs. But when it comes to a partner or a parent or a fiercely close friend, the stakes instantly become existential.
Existential. That's a heavy word for a romantic relationship.
But biologically, it's accurate. This brings our attachment systems into play. And these aren't just, abstract concepts. They are ancient, survival-based biological mechanisms.
Wired into the oldest parts of our brain.
Exactly. Think about a human infant. Maintaining proximity to a caregiver is literally a matter of life and death. If the caregiver abandons them, they die.
So it's a hardwired survival instinct.
Yes, so we evolved this alarm system. When a close relationship is threatened, or even just perceived to be threatened, like by a harsh tone of voice, it triggers that deep evolutionary alarm bell.
So we're reacting to a marital argument the same way our ancestors reacted to, like, a predator in the bushes.
That is exactly what happens on a neurochemical level.
Yeah.
Your amygdala, the threat detection center, it just fires right up.
And floods the body with all the stress hormones.
Yeah, adrenaline, cortisol, the fight or flight response activates. And the biological consequence of that extreme arousal is that the prefrontal cortex essentially dims down.
The logical part just goes to sleep.
It has to. It goes offline to conserve energy for basic survival reactions. You literally lose the neurological capacity to objectively observe your own mind and the other person's mind.
That is terrifying when you really think about it.
It really is. You're no longer mentalizing. You're just reacting to a perceived mortal danger.
It means that the emotional stakes create a blind spot exactly where we need to see the most clearly.
That's a great way to put it.
Because when my partner is upset, that is the exact moment I desperately need my prefrontal cortex to help me understand their perspective. But my biology is actively shutting it down.
And that right there is why the publications on M.B.T. emphasize close relationships as the ultimate goal.
Because if you can do it there, you can do it anywhere.
Precisely. If a patient can learn to maintain their mentalizing capacity in that fiery crucible, where the biological pull to panic is the absolute strongest, then they've mastered the skill.
But you highlighted a crucial word earlier from the material recovery.
Yes, ensures faster recovery when overwhelmed.
Because I think a lot of people go into therapy thinking the goal is to just never get upset again.
Oh, constantly. It's a vital distinction. The goal of M.B.T. is not to turn you into some enlightened, unfeeling robot.
Right, some mythical Zen master on a mountain.
Yeah, where conflicts just bounce off you. That is an impossible standard for any human being. And trying to reach it just leads to emotional suppression.
Which always backfires eventually.
Always. Everyone's mentalizing drops when they are highly aroused. Everyone. The goal is elasticity.
Elasticity, I like that.
It's the ability to recognize in the moment, okay, I have been triggered, my attachment system is flooding me, I am overwhelmed, and then having the tools to bring your brain back to baseline much faster.
It makes me think of an emotional thermostat.
Oh, that's a brilliant analogy. Walk me through that.
Well, the goal of therapy isn't to build like a concrete subterranean bunker where you avoid the weather entirely. You live in the world. You're going to experience severe weather.
Relationships will always have storms.
Right. So the goal is to upgrade your internal thermostat in your HVAC system.
Yeah.
So when a massive conflict causes the temperature in the house to just spike to 100 degrees, the whole electrical panel doesn't blow a fuse and burn the house down.
Yes. The upgraded system detects the spike.
Exactly. It detects the heat, kicks in the air conditioning, and regulates the environment back to a livable temperature before permanent damage is done.
That is exactly what recovery means in this context. You're building a more robust, responsive, emotional thermostat. But of course, that raises the fundamental question.
How do we actually build it?
Exactly. If these reactions are hardwired into our neurobiology, how does sitting in a room and talking to strangers actually upgrade that internal hardware?
Which brings us perfectly to the core mechanisms of this treatment. When you dive into the publications on M.B.T., they lay out 5 very specific pillars for why psychotherapy and group therapy in particular actually works.
Right. It's not magic. It's a highly structured process.
Yeah, I don't want to just read a clinical list to the listener because that doesn't capture the human experience.
Yeah.
Let's walk through what a patient actually feels, starting with the very first terrifying step.
Opening your mouth and sharing an intimate feeling.
Yes. The material says this sharing actually helps you recognize the feeling better. But why? If I already feel awful, how does just saying I feel awful change anything?
Well, it sounds so deceptively simple, right? Like a pop psychology cliche, just talk about your feelings.
Right, we see it on bumper stickers.
But there's profound neurobiology at work here. Think about what happens before you even speak. When a severe emotion is swirling inside your body, a deep sense of dread, tight chest, racing heart, it's a raw somatic experience.
Pure physical sensation.
Yes, pure unprocessed affect. For someone with a personality vulnerability, that sensation is often overwhelming and completely lacks a label. It just feels like danger.
It's just chaotic static in the body.
Exactly. But when you're sitting in a therapy room and the structure forces you to articulate that feeling out loud, you have to engage entirely different networks in your brain.
Like the language centers.
Right. To put words to a feeling, you route that raw data through areas like Broca's area and Wernicke's area, which connect to your prefrontal cortex.
So you're forcing the chaotic static through a cognitive filter.
Yes. By attempting to translate the raw feeling into a sentence for another human to understand, you are actively moving the experience from the emotional brain to the logical brain. You're literally naming it to tame it.
So the very act of trying to explain the mess to someone else forces your brain to organize the mess for yourself. You suddenly see the borders of the emotion.
Exactly. It's not just everything is terrible. It becomes, I am feeling a profound sense of shame right now because of what happened this morning.
You're mentalizing your own internal state by narrating it.
Yes. And that bridges directly into what happens next in the room. Once you've spoken that shameful feeling out loud, the second pillar of healing activates.
The reduction of loneliness.
Yes. But we need to be incredibly precise about how the publications on M.B.T. define loneliness here.
Right, because we aren't talking about sitting alone in an apartment on a Friday night watching TV.
Not at all. Physical isolation is painful, sure. But the loneliness addressed here is a profound existential loneliness. It is the devastating feeling of being inherently, permanently misunderstood by the universe.
Wow. Permanently misunderstood.
It's the belief that your internal world is so chaotic or so uniquely damaged that no one on Earth could possibly comprehend it.
People struggling with this can walk through a crowded room, totally surrounded by family, and feel utterly alone.
Absolutely, because they feel trapped behind the opaque glass of their own minds. They often describe feeling like an alien species just pretending to be human.
So imagine carrying that existential isolation for decades.
Yeah.
And then you sit in a group therapy circle.
Right, and you finally articulate your most shameful impulse. Maybe a moment of intense jealousy where you actually wanted to destroy your partner's belongings.
And you brace yourself for everyone to be disgusted.
You expect total rejection. But instead, another group member looks across the circle and says, I know exactly what you mean. I felt that exact same terrifying urge last week.
The relief must be physical.
It is physiological. You can literally see patients' shoulders drop. The isolation is shattered in an instant. They realize, I am not an alien. I am a human being.
And someone else is in here with me.
Yes. And once that bridge is established, the therapy can introduce the third and probably most jarring pillar of healing.
Which is exposure to different thoughts and ideas from others about the exact same situation. I find this part fascinating because it seems like a massive shock to this system.
Oh, it's a profound shock. It's the moment the illusion of absolute reality breaks. To understand why, we have to talk about a state of mind called psychic equivalence.
Right, where the internal equals the external.
Exactly. When mentalizing fails, we regress into this state. Psychic equivalence means whatever I feel inside my mind is exactly equal to the objective reality of the world.
So if I feel you're angry with me, it is a scientific fact that you are angry with me?
Yes. There's no room for alternative interpretations. The internal feeling is the external reality.
It's a closed loop. My fear creates the reality, and the reality justifies my fear.
Perfectly said. So a patient comes into group, locked in psychic equivalence. They say, my sister didn't return my phone call yesterday. It is obvious she hates me and is abandoning me.
They present it as a documented fact, not a feeling.
Right. Now, if they were just talking to a bartender, the bartender might nod and say, yeah, your sister sounds awful.
Which doesn't help at all.
No. But in the therapeutic laboratory, another group member chimes in and says, when I hear your story, I don't think she hates you at all. I think she might just be overwhelmed with her kids.
Because when I'm overwhelmed with my kids, I ignore my phone.
And I actually feel guilty about it, not hateful.
That just completely fractures the prism of their reality.
Yes. It creates a sudden, safe cognitive dissonance. The patient is forced to realize, wait, this other person can look at the exact same data point, the unreturned call, and come to a completely different, equally plausible conclusion.
It breaks the illusion that their internal feeling is the only reality.
It proves, in real time, that alternative perspectives exist.
Okay, I want to pause here and push back on this a little bit. I need to play the role of the skeptical listener.
Go for it.
Because I can hear someone thinking, sure, that sounds nice, but isn't this just a fancy clinical way of describing venting to your friends?
It's a very common question.
Right. If I have a problem, I call my best friend, I tell them what happened, they give me their perspective, and I feel better. Why do I need a highly trained, multidisciplinary team to do what friends do over coffee?
That is a phenomenal question, and it's the exact boundary line between seeking comfort and seeking structural change. It leads directly into the final two pillars outlined in the publications on M.B.T.
Using therapy as a practice ground and practicing allowing others in.
Yes, because when you vent to a friend, your friend's primary goal is to offer comfort and validation. They aren't trying to challenge your neurological pathways.
They love me, so they take my side.
Exactly. If you're stuck in psychic equivalence and say, my boss gave me a weird look, he's definitely firing me, your friend will likely say your boss is a jerk, don't let him get to you.
They are essentially agreeing with my broken thermostat.
Precisely. They validate the non-mentalizing state. It feels really good in the short term, but it reinforces the cognitive distortion. It does absolutely nothing to improve your mentalizing capacity.
And friends can get burnt out too.
Oh, absolutely. Friendships carry real-world consequences. If you repeatedly dump your deepest, most chaotic paranoia onto a friend, eventually they might pull away.
Which then triggers the exact abandonment trauma you're terrified of.
Exactly. The stakes are too high in the real world. But the therapy environment, as designed in the publications on M.B.T, is an artificial laboratory. It's a highly controlled environment.
So the therapists and group members aren't there to just blindly agree with you to make you feel better?
No, they are there to build a secure, intimate bond, but within a rigid framework that relentlessly pushes you to examine how you are thinking.
It's a sandbox where you can experiment with vulnerability and conflict.
Without the catastrophic real-world fallout. If you get angry and yell at a group member, they don't abandon you. You all sit down the next day and analyze the mental states that led to the yelling.
You're studying the machinery of the interaction while you're simultaneously inside the interaction. That's incredibly complex.
It's exhaustingly complex.
And it requires an unbelievably secure, heavily reinforced container. You can't just set up a folding chair in a community center and do that casually.
No, the structure is paramount.
Which brings us to the actual architecture of this recovery program. When you look at the timeline and the team involved, as detailed in the clinical handouts, the sheer scale of the commitment is staggering.
We are definitely not talking about a quick fix here.
No, we're talking about a monumental undertaking. The publications on M.B.T break the architecture down into three very distinct, highly regulated phases, right?
Yes. First, there's the preparation phase. This lasts roughly 3 to 4 months, and it is entirely foundational.
What does that actually look like for the patient?
It involves biweekly talks with an individual therapist and a sociotherapist, a comprehensive visit with a psychiatrist to assess medication needs.
Drafting a highly detailed crisis plan.
Yes, a treatment and crisis plan is drafted, and they attend 12 sessions of M.B.T introductory, or MBTI.
So that's just the warm-up. 3 to 4 months of intense clinical work before you even hit the main event.
Correct. It's all about stabilization and education. Because once that foundation is secure, the patient enters the main phase.
Which can last up to 18 months.
A maximum of 18 months, yes. And this is the crucible. It involves weekly individual therapy plus group psychotherapy that ranges from 1 to 6 times a week.
6 times a week. That's almost a full-time job.
For severe cases, yes. There might also be additional modules like creative or writing therapy to access nonverbal mentalizing, and as-needed consults with sociotherapists or system therapists.
And then, if they successfully navigate that crucible, they enter the aftercare phase.
Right, which is another maximum of 18 months. This is a very gradual, careful tapering off of the individual therapy and other supports.
To ensure they don't experience a sudden cliff drop of abandonment.
Exactly. You can't just cut the cord instantly.
So let's do the math on that. 4 months of prep, 18 months of main therapy, 18 months of aftercare. We're talking about a highly intensive treatment plan spanning roughly 3.5 years of a person's life.
It's a massive chunk of time.
Why is it so long? We live in an era of rapid life hacks. Why can't we just put someone in an intensive, 8 hours a day, 6-week crash course, teach them the theory, and send them on their way?
Because you cannot life hack neuroplasticity, especially not when dealing with profound relational trauma. We are talking about fundamentally rewiring the brain's default approach to emotional regulation.
It's like trying to reroute a river that's been carving a canyon for 20 years.
That's a great image. Think about the neuroscience of habit formation. The brain's current non-mentalizing reactions, the sudden rage, the paranoia, the withdrawal, these are neurological superhighways.
Carved deep into the brain over decades.
Yes, often starting in early childhood in response to severe trauma or chronic invalidation. These superhighways are fast, they're automatic, and they are incredibly efficient at keeping the person safe from perceived annihilation.
Right, the brain goes down those roads instantly without even thinking about it.
Exactly. Now, the new skill we're trying to build, pausing, regulating the amygdala, keeping the prefrontal cortex online, that neural pathway is currently a tiny, overgrown dirt path in the brain.
It's weak and slow.
It's exhausting to use. A 6-week crash course can teach you the intellectual theory of the dirt path. It can give you a cognitive behavioral trick, like taking 10 deep breaths.
But it doesn't change the hardware.
No. To turn that dirt path into an automatic default superhighway and to let the old destructive superhighways actually atrophy from disuse takes an immense amount of repetitive, sustained, grueling practice.
It takes years for the neurons to physically rewire. The scale of it really makes me think of building a skyscraper.
Oh, I like that. Expand on that.
Well, you don't just walk onto a vacant dirt lot, take a multiple-choice exam on engineering, and suddenly a skyscraper appears. You have to endure the physical reality of construction.
Right, the heavy lifting.
You have the foundational groundwork first. That's your 3 to 4 month preparation phase. You're mapping out blueprints, checking the stability of the soil, which is your crisis plan.
You need to know the ground can hold the weight.
Exactly. Then you transition into the structural construction of the main phase. This is where the patient is pouring concrete and welding steel beams every single day for 18 months.
It's exhausting, dirty labor. There will be days when a storm rolls in and construction halts entirely.
Setbacks are inevitable. And then finally, the aftercare phase is the meticulous finishing touches. It's the safety inspections, learning how to actually live inside the building and perform routine maintenance.
Before the massive construction crew packs up their equipment and leaves the site.
Right. And speaking of that crew, I noticed in the guidelines from the publications on M.B.T. that the construction crew is inherently multidisciplinary. It's not just one therapist doing all this.
No, it's far too much weight for one single therapist to bear. You have the individual therapist whose primary role is to focus on the patient's internal micro-level mentalizing process.
But then you also have a sociotherapist.
Yes. Their role is to look outward at the practical social circumstances of the patient's life. Housing, employment, daily routines. They help develop practical signaling plans for when things go wrong in the real world.
And sometimes a system therapist, right?
Exactly. They zoom out even further to look at the broader family or social system because no one lives in a vacuum. If a patient is doing incredible work in therapy but goes home to a highly toxic, non-mentalizing family...
The structural integrity of the skyscraper is totally compromised.
Precisely. It's a whole ecosystem of professionals wrapping around the patient.
And I noted from the material that this entire treatment plan is evaluated every 3 months with the patient and this team. Why the rigid 3-month schedule?
That 3-month evaluation is the anchor of accountability for the entire program. It prevents the therapy from drifting into complacency.
Because 3.5 years is a long time to just drift.
It's incredibly easy for therapy of that length to devolve into a cozy routine where the patient just shows up, chats about their week, vents a bit, and leaves without doing the hard, painful work.
The evaluations force everyone to look at the hard data.
Yes. They sit down and ask, are we actually making progress? Are the skills translating to the outside world? If not, why not? It keeps the therapy active and purposeful.
Okay, so if the preparation phase is the blueprint and the 3-month reviews are the building inspections, the heaviest lifting, the pouring of the concrete happens in the main phase, specifically during those intensive group therapy sessions.
That is where the real magic and the real friction happens.
And this is where things get genuinely fascinating and, honestly, highly controversial. Because when we look at the rules governing these group sessions, as outlined in the publications on M.B.T., they are paradoxical.
They are incredibly strict, and they definitely cause a lot of anger for new patients.
I can imagine. Let's look at the core structure. First, there's a fundamental rule of autonomy. The patients decide what to discuss in the group.
Right. The therapists do not walk in with a clipboard and an agenda.
But once the session begins, we hit the major boundaries. There is an urgent advice, which seems to be a hard mandate, against any contact between group members outside of the therapy room.
None. No outside contact whatsoever.
Wait, none. Like no getting coffee after a heavy session, no texting each other for support, no carpooling.
No coffee, no texts, no carpooling, and the rule goes further.
Ugh.
Because human beings are prone to breaking rules, if outside contact does happen, it must absolutely be brought into the next group session and discussed openly.
Wow. And then there's the most dramatic rule of all. Intimate or romantic relationships between group members are strictly forbidden.
Unequivocally forbidden.
If a romance blooms, the publications on M.B.T clearly state that one of the two people must immediately leave the group and seek therapy elsewhere.
Yes, one person has to go.
Okay, I'm putting my skeptical listener hat firmly back on, and I'm pushing back hard on this because it sounds almost cruel.
I completely understand why it feels that way.
We just spent half an hour talking about how the entire point of this therapy is to cure profound existential loneliness. These patients feel like aliens, and the goal is to build better close relationships.
Yes, that is the goal.
So a patient goes into a group, they are vulnerable, they finally meet someone who truly understands them, someone who shatters their isolation, and your response is to ban them from getting a cup of coffee.
It seems contradictory, I know.
Or worse, if two incredibly lonely people find love, you punish them by kicking one of them out of the program. Aren't you aggressively denying them the exact support network they desperately need to heal?
It is the most common emotionally resonant objection to the entire M.B.T framework. It feels cruel, but we have to zoom out and return to the concept of therapy room as a highly calibrated, pristine laboratory.
Okay, walk me through the logic.
The moment you take a therapeutic relationship outside the walls of that room, you introduce uncontrollable variables that fundamentally destroy the safety, transparency, and efficacy of the group for everyone.
How so? What actually happens with outside contact?
Let's break it down. Say you and I are in a group together, we have a heavy session, and afterward we decide to go grab a cup of coffee. While we're having coffee, you complain to me about a third group member. Let's call him John.
Okay, so I vent to you that I think John is manipulative.
Right. Or perhaps you share a deep, dark secret with me that you haven't felt ready to share in the group yet.
Which feels like a natural bonding moment for us.
It does. But the next week, we all walk back into the therapy room. What has happened? There is now a hidden, invisible dynamic in the room.
Oh, there are secret alliances. It's high school all over again. Cliques are forming.
Exactly. It breeds loyalty conflicts. If John starts speaking in the group, and I know that you secretly hate him, my ability to interact with John honestly is compromised. I'm carrying your secret.
And if you know my dark secret, you might treat me differently too.
Right. My ability to challenge your mentalizing is compromised because I'm navigating information that isn't public to the rest of the room. The level playing field of the group is instantly destroyed.
The safety relies entirely on radical transparency.
Yes. The medicine of the group is the public exploration of minds. If the real interactions, the real conflicts, and the real support are happening in the clinic parking lot or over late-night text messages.
Then the group session just becomes a hollow, theatrical performance.
Exactly. You are mixing a therapeutic relationship with a social friendship, and doing so ruins the medicine.
That makes a lot of sense when you explain the mechanics of it. You're basically diluting the chemical reaction in the beaker before the scientist can even study it.
That's a perfect analogy.
Okay, I concede the point on the coffee and the texting, but the romantic relationship rule still feels draconian to me, forcing someone to abandon their treatment program if they fall in love.
The phrasing in the material is very striking on this point.
Yeah, the publications on M.B.T state point blank, falling in love inhibits mentalization. I need you to deeply analyze that for us, because poetry and movies tell us that love is the ultimate understanding of another person.
They do. It's a stunning, deeply unromantic phrase, isn't it?
Very unromantic. Why does clinical psychology say that falling in love destroys our ability to mentalize?
To truly grasp this, we have to strip away the poetry and look at the brutal neurobiology and psychology of early-stage romantic love, specifically the honeymoon phase.
Okay, what's happening in the brain during the honeymoon phase?
When we fall in love, our brains are flooded with a cocktail of neurochemicals, primarily dopamine, which drives reward and obsession, and oxytocin, which drives bonding and attachment.
Go love drugs.
Right. From an evolutionary standpoint, this cocktail is designed to rapidly bond two humans together to ensure the survival of the species. But neurologically, this massive surge of oxytocin acts almost like a mute button for the brain's critical thinking and threat detection centers.
Wait, really? It literally suppresses critical thinking.
Yes, it suppresses the circuits in the prefrontal cortex used for objective social judgment. You are chemically induced to ignore red flags.
So the rose-colored glasses are biological.
They are biologically mandated. But psychologically, something even more profound happens. Early-stage romantic love triggers a state of massive projection and the blurring of psychological boundaries.
Merging of identities.
Exactly. When you are infatuated, you do not see the actual, distinct, flawed, separate, complex mind of the other person. You see an idealized version of them that perfectly aligns with your own unmet needs and fantasies.
We see what we desperately want to see, not who is actually standing in front of us.
Yes, we blur the boundary between me and you. If I feel a certain way, I naturally assume you feel the exact same way, because we are soulmates and we are one.
And that state of boundaryless merging is the exact opposite of mentalizing.
Yes. Because mentalizing, by definition, requires recognizing that the other person's mind is completely separate and opaque from yours.
Oh, well.
Mentalizing requires a stance of curiosity. It requires the ability to step back and say, I am over here and you are over there. You have a different history, a different brain, and different motivations. I can try to guess what's in your head, but I don't inherently know.
But when you're newly in love, you feel an absolute intoxicating certainty that you know their soul completely.
You're not curious about their separate mind. You are merged with it. Therefore, if two people in a therapy group fall in love, they lose all capacity to objectively observe each other.
And the rest of the group can't objectively observe them either.
Exactly, because their dynamic is entirely clouded by this intense, fiercely protective attachment. They will defend each other unconditionally rather than exploring each other's mental states. It completely short-circuits the therapeutic work of the entire room.
That is mind-blowing. It's so deeply unromantic, but the biological and psychological mechanics make undeniable logical sense. You can't perform microscopic brain surgery while riding a roller coaster.
The environment has to remain stable. That's why the rule is absolute. One person must leave to maintain the integrity of the laboratory.
Okay, so let's say the boundaries are held. The group is sealed off from outside contamination. The lab is pristine. No texting, no falling in love. What exactly is happening inside that room?
Now we get to the actual active practice.
Right. How are the therapists and patients flexing this mentalizing muscle? This brings us to the final major section of the deep dive, the not knowing stance and the requirements of practice.
This is where we examine the posture of the therapists themselves, which is arguably the most unique aspect of M.B.T.
The clinical guidelines explicitly state the treatment is not focused on giving tips or advice, right?
Correct. The core philosophy is that if the therapy successfully improves the underlying mentalizing capacity, the patient will naturally become equipped to find their own solutions. So the therapist must adopt what's called a curious and not knowing stance.
I have to imagine that is incredibly difficult for the therapists.
Oh, it goes against every instinct they have.
Right. People go into the mental health field because they're empathetic. When they see someone in immense pain, they want to offer a solution. Sitting there and pretending you don't know the answer must be so hard.
It's deeply counterintuitive, especially for clinicians trained in directive modalities like CBT. The natural instinct when a patient comes in crying about a massive fight with their spouse is to say, oh, that's terrible. Here's what you should do next time to de-escalate.
Give them communication techniques.
Right. But in M.B.T., acting like an omniscient guru who dispenses life advice is actually considered clinically harmful.
Why? If the advice is good, why is it harmful?
Because it robs the patient of the opportunity to flex and build their own mentalizing muscles. Let's use an academic analogy. If a student is struggling with a complex calculus problem and they're crying out of frustration and the teacher walks over and just writes the correct answer on the chalkboard to make them feel better.
The student hasn't learned calculus.
Exactly. They just have the answer to one isolated problem. When the next calculus problem arises on the exam, they will be entirely helpless all over again.
So if the therapist solves the emotional puzzle, the patient remains dependent on the therapist's brain instead of developing their own.
Yes. The not knowing stance requires the therapist to suppress their ego, step back, and say, I hear how painful that fight was, but I don't know why it escalated so quickly. Let's figure it out together.
What do you think is going on in your mind? What was going on in your spouse's mind?
It forces the patient to do the heavy, exhausting cognitive lifting.
I love the analogy of a driving instructor here. A truly effective driving instructor doesn't lean over, grab the steering wheel, and drive the car for you just because the road is slick.
And they shouldn't act like a GPS system either.
Right, just marking out commands. Turn left here, slow down to 30, brake now. Because what happens when the GPS gets turned off or the patient graduates from the program? the driver crashes at the first intersection.
That's a perfect analogy.
Instead, the M.B.T therapist is sitting calmly in the passenger seat. When the car starts drifting into the oncoming lane, they don't panic. They just look over, genuinely curious, and ask, "Why do you think we're drifting across the center line right now?"
Yes. The therapist is there to draw attention to the process of driving, not to dictate the destination. And to facilitate this in group, the publications on MBT outline 5 very specific requirements for the patients.
Let's run through those.
First, patients are required to regularly share intense personal life events, specifically focusing on moments of impulsive action, extreme conflict, or overwhelming feelings.
Because that's when mentalizing breaks down the most.
Yeah.
You don't bring up your easy breezy Tuesday afternoon. You bring the moment you lost control and threw your phone against the wall.
Exactly. You must bring the failures into the laboratory. Second, the group as a whole must explore these situations together to find alternative perspectives, fracturing that psychic equivalence.
And the third requirement.
This is crucial. The patients must be actively involved and try to mentalize both toward themselves and toward the other group members. They essentially become co-therapists for each other.
Practicing the skill by helping others practice the skill. That's powerful.
Fourth, everyone in the room must utilize the exact same mentalizing framework. They are taught to speak the same psychological language, which creates a shared culture of inquiry.
And the fifth requirement,
Through this grueling process, they must build a genuine bond with one another.
which requires an absolutely immense amount of vulnerability. I mean, think about what we're asking these people to do.
It's staggering.
You are walking into a room of peers, bringing the moments of your life that you are most deeply ashamed of, your worst impulses, your most toxic behaviors, and placing them on the table for public dissection.
But the magic is that you're doing it in a room where every other person is doing the exact same thing, guided by a therapist who refuses to judge you.
Because they genuinely adopt that stance of not knowing. It is a shared, communal endeavor of rebuilding the human mind.
It is incredibly brave work. The vulnerability itself is the primary mechanism of change. By exposing the moments where mentalization failed catastrophically, in an environment that remains curious rather than punitive, the toxic shame dissipates.
And where shame dissipates, genuine curiosity about oneself and others can finally begin to grow.
Beautifully said.
This has been such a deeply illuminating journey today. We've moved from the high-level goal of regulating our internal relational thermostats through the neurobiological pillars of why sharing heals the brain.
We unpacked the massive architectural timeline.
Yeah, the years required to slowly rewire those neural superhighways. We decoded why the strictest rules like banning outside friendships are actually vital guardians of the laboratory, and we saw the radical humility required of the therapist to not know the answers.
It is a profoundly structured, scientifically rigorous approach to managing the most chaotic, messy parts of the human experience. And as we wrap up this exploration of the Session 8 handouts from the publications on MBT, it's worth looking at the specific homework prompt at the end of the session.
Yeah, let's talk about the homework.
It asks a deceptively simple question. Did you run into problems discussing relevant events from your own life in one of the last group meetings?
That is such a fascinating, targeted question. It's not asking, did you successfully solve your life problems this week? It's asking the patient to look at the friction of the process itself.
Exactly. It's designed to encourage metacognition thinking about thinking. It asks the patient to step back and reflect on their own internal resistance.
So if they sat in group and realized they couldn't bring up the fight they had with their spouse, the homework asks them, what was blocking you?
Was it a spike of shame? Was it an intense fear of the group's judgment? A temporary failure of trust in the therapist? By examining the problem of discussing the problem, they are actively practicing mentalizing in its purest form. They are observing their own mind.
Which brings me to a final provocative thought that I want to leave you, the listener, with today. You spent this entire hour talking about the intense mechanics of a clinical therapy program. But the truth is, this framework applies to every single one of us navigating human relationships.
Absolutely everyone.
Think about your own life. Think about the last massive argument you had with someone you love. Think about the moment you felt absolutely 100% certain about their malicious motives. I know exactly why they did that. They did it to hurt me.
We've all been there.
What if those moments of absolute ironclad certainty are actually the exact moments you are mentalizing the least? What if your certainty is just your biology blinding you? What would happen if, in your next moment of absolute anger and certainty, you force yourself to pause, take a breath, and adopt the curious and not knowing stance toward the person you love most?
It changes everything.
In the next episode, we will continue with Session 9, titled Mentalization-Based Treatment Part 2. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to follow us to stay up to date with our latest episodes.